Real property refers to land, the structures that sit on it, and the things that grow out of it. There is a whole bunch of laws and legal concepts that relate to the issues surrounding real property, including the ownership of property and the use of it. There are 5 main types of real property ownership, starting with fee simple. Fee simple basically means you have full ownership and you can do pretty much whatever you want with that ownership. You could sell or transfer it to someone else, or you could dispose of your property however you want. The second type of ownership is life estate. That means during your lifetime, you have the right to use the property or make money from it, such as by renting it out. But once you pass away, what happens to the property is already predetermined. For example, a couple might decide that once the first spouse passes away, the other spouse will have a life estate, meaning they have the right to live in the house for the rest of their lives or to rent it out. But once they pass away, the house must go to their kids. The next type of ownership is concurrent estates, which essentially means more than one party has an ownership interest in the property. Under concurrent estates, there are actually 4 subcategories. The first one is joint tenancy, which is when all owners have equal shares. If one of the parties dies, under joint tenancy, their share automatically gets absorbed by the remaining owners. If there is more than one remaining owner, they will all split the deceased owner's share equally amongst themselves. Tenancy by entirety is the exact same thing as joint tenancy, except that it specifically means the 2 joint owners are spouses. Again, if either one passes away, the other spouse will automatically inherit the deceased person's share. With tenancy in common, the parties don't have to have equal shares. On top of that, the shares can remain separate even after that owner dies, meaning the owner can decide to pass on their share to heirs rather than the other original joint owners. Finally, community property is when spouses automatically get a 50% interest in any property that either spouse acquires during the marriage. If you're from a state that does not follow community property laws, any property that you acquire while you're married will stay yours alone unless you decide to put it jointly under both of your names. The next type of real property ownership is cooperative ownership, which is sometimes referred to as a co-op. In cooperative ownership, a corporation is set up to buy a property, usually an apartment building. Then, people will buy shares in the co-op corporation in exchange for a long-term lease that allows them to live on the property. The corporation is responsible for financing, aka borrowing the money to obtain the property, construction, if they're going to be building their own building rather than buying an existing one, operating and maintaining the building, and collecting a monthly fee from the owners to cover a mortgage and any other joint property expenses. If you've ever purchased an apartment and paid maintenance fees, the idea of a cooperative ownership is very similar, except the main difference is that instead of you owning your individual apartment, you simply own stock in a corporation that happens to own the entire building. One of the benefits to being a stockholder in a co-op is that you have the right to live there as long as you want, whereas someone else, the corporation, is responsible for the maintenance and operation of the property. A big downside, though, is that if you want to sell your shares, it might be hard to find a buyer because most people would rather own 100% of their own apartment than, say, 5% of an apartment building. Another downside is that if other owners can't keep up with their monthly payments to the corporation, a bank could technically foreclose on the entire building because the corporation wouldn't be able to keep up with the building's monthly mortgage payments. If instead you simply owned your apartment 100% rather than sharing ownership of a whole building with a bunch of other people, whether or not they could make their mortgage payments wouldn't really be your problem then. That's why condominium ownership, the last form of real property ownership, is a lot more common. Under condominium ownership, each unit is separated into its own entity, so the owner would own 100% of their own apartment or townhome, and then everyone would get a percentage of the shared stuff, which is referred to as the common elements. This includes stuff like the parking lot, any shared recreational facilities like the pool, and also any shared plumbing or utilities.